Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Unleash Your Voice. I am your host, Priya Sam, and I'm so thrilled to have Kelly Ramirez with us today. Kelly is an executive coach and the founder of Elemental Leadership, where she works with 7- and 8-figure founders and senior executives who are navigating pivotal moments of evolution in their businesses and their leadership. Before becoming a coach, Kelly had one of the most fascinating career paths I've ever encountered. She's been an outdoor guide in the mountains of Wyoming and Chile, a fellow in a social enterprise incubator launching small businesses in Latin America, a Google executive driving strategy for the top 1% of global advertisers, and the founder of a 7-figure e-commerce firm she built from 0 to 7 figures in under 4 years. As you can tell, she has some great stories. What Kelly has brought to her coaching practice is something that's really rare. The combination of a psychology background from Dartmouth, deep experience inside some of the world's most complex organizations, and a personal journey of transformation that led her to do this work in the first place. Kelly is also a former client of mine, and together we built her Power Story Bank, and I think you're going to hear some of those stories today. Kelly, welcome to Unleash Your Voice. I'm so happy you're here.
Oh, Priya, thank you. I've really been looking forward to this, and that was such a kind introduction. I appreciate it.
You have such an incredible story. And actually, as I was thinking about asking you this first question, because I know your story,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I wonder what she's going to say. So let's start by you telling me about a time you unleashed your voice.
Oh, yeah. And I know this is a question that you start with. So I was thinking a little bit about this. The one that comes to mind immediately, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but you had mentioned I built a 7-figure consulting business from the ground up, and I was in about year 4 of it, anticipating taking a little break. I'd been just charging through my career at Google. We made a big move from Seattle back to Montana, and I started up a couple businesses. They grew very quickly. It was really exciting, but I was starting to feel like I was losing my path a little bit, losing my way. And I thought, well, I'll take a 3-month sabbatical. I've got an amazing team. They can run the business while I'm gone. And then after 3 months, 90 days, right, I'll hop back in. And so I was preparing for that 3-month sabbatical and was in Santa Barbara doing some business development. So my goal was to and anybody who has a consulting business or runs their own enterprise knows this task, which is loading the pipeline. So there's enough business that could sustain the team while I was gone. And I had the opportunity to pitch directly to the CEO of a $70 million shoe brand. Ideal client for that business that I was running. There was a strong relationship. And he asked me in a meeting, pitch me. And my team had done a great job putting together the pitch deck. He called his team in to listen from the room. We were in his conference room. And, I did what I always did. I opened the pitch deck and started to talk. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but all of a sudden I was hovering above my body, watching myself. My mouth was moving. I was saying all the right things. But that, I just knew something was off. And the pitch ends, it went fine. I was out of my body, so I didn't do my A+ work. But, I closed my laptop and I turned to the person who had invited me to the meeting and made the introduction to the CEO. And his name is Craig. And I said, Craig, I don't want to do this anymore. He was like, what do you mean? And I said, actually, all of it. This isn't it for me. I love working with you, but this, there's something else. And it was so weird, Priya, to say those words, particularly, I don't want to do this anymore, because there have been moments in my life before where I'd had that feeling, like my throat or my chest tighten, or just I don't want this. But not until that moment had I actually allowed those words to come out of my mouth. And then when they were out there in that uncomfortable confusion, let them be true. So a lot happened after that moment, which maybe we'll get into, but that was a moment where I feel like my voice, I allowed the truth to come out. And then once I saw it, I could not unsee it. And I began, right then, the next steps were following whatever that opened. So that I would pick that as my moment.
What I love about this is you literally unleashed your voice. Your voice literally came out. It's a very literal example of I can't hold this in anymore. I need to let it out and unleash it.
And a surprise, right?
Yeah.
you know, it was true. There was nothing
Mhm.
about that that wasn't true. But I think had I not been, and at the time I had been working with an executive coach and really refining, like, what is my why? Like, what's the function of me and my work besides, right? I was so proud of the business I built. I loved the team, but I knew something was off, even though anybody around me was like, just keep going, copy paste, copy paste. There's nothing wrong or confusing about this, but I didn't know what was going to come next, but I knew that that was true. And with that being true, I didn't want to take it back.
Absolutely. I hear from a lot of the women that I work with, like, a similar experience where, like,
Mm.
on paper and the people around them, they're like, "You're doing great. Like, why do you want something else? Like, just keep
Yeah.
going." But when you know you're meant for something more and something different, and I actually think this is an experience that women have more than men do, because I've never heard of a man saying, "I have this big dream to do this," and someone saying, why don't you just stay where you are? Like, just,
Mm.
"Whoa, like, calm down. Why do you need to do that?" But, like, almost all the women I work with, like, someone has said that to them at one point, like, "Just be happy with where you are." Like, why would you try to, ruffle any feathers or shake things up when you
Huh.
have this stable path? But it's like, yeah, like, I mean, I know that feeling. I had that feeling when I was leaving corporate too,
I
where I was
remember
like,
hearing your story about that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like, once you say that or you have that, like, moment of confirmation or validation, however that shows up, like you said, you need to follow through and you need to do something.
Yeah. I mean, not only conviction, but like deeper awareness too,
Yeah.
because just like you said, if like predominantly, I think as women, we are complex, right? There's a lot of complexity.
Mhm.
And even being able to say something that you know is true that might directly challenge or stand in the face of other people's perceptions or assumptions or what they've learned, right? Well, God, you had this incredible path. I had a mentor say to me about that business, like, when you broke $1.5 million, you literally, all you need to do is copy paste, like make a bunch of calls, get in front of a bunch of people. And sure, that I know I could have grown that business to $5 million and 10, I'm absolutely certain. But I felt like this, like shrinking or like, disconnection. I was like increasingly disconnected. And I think sometimes expressing that feels soft, but there's also a lot of wisdom in it that I think women, we are uniquely positioned to access that. And
Yes.
for a long time, we've been taught that that's a weakness. But in fact, I believe it is a strength. But you all, like, I think, yeah, maybe we'll continue to talk about what it takes to even continue move forward. But you'll feel resistance every step along the way when you're following
Mm.
that truth. And it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're trying something new. And so, yeah, I remember hearing your story about that and knowing, I'm certain I know women who have worked with you and that there's like that little voice.
Yep.
But it doesn't have the answer. It's not going to tell you exactly what to do next, but you do have a chance to see what's true.
Absolutely, yes. In the beginning, in the intro, I went through your career path and, how you started, like, being an outdoor guide, and then you worked in the nonprofit sector, and then you worked at Google, then you started this business, and now you're a coach. And a lot of the women I work with also have, like, very diverse backgrounds. And sometimes what I hear from them is, like, they think it's a weakness, right? Or
Oh, I
something
know.
that, like, they worry about, like, "Oh, people are gonna see my resume and feel like it's all over the place." When actually, with your story, you can often position that as your biggest differentiator. So I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear from you, like, when you look back through all of those experiences, what would you say is that common thread?
Yeah. God, I love that question. And I think one of the reasons that I really am just a super fan of your work is because nobody else can connect the pieces for us, right? It's like when you go to put a puzzle together and like when it's your own story, that thread or what's most important to you, that does become, right, well, part of your unique attributes, what you can offer to others, the talent that you bring to the room or the way that you see a problem. And so I think like finding the thread is really important. But if I were to share like if we were all, everybody who's listening right now, if we were all sitting around a table and there's like one thing that I would want to say, it's that there can be many years when you have a sense, like you know that you're following something that feels good or feels like the next step, but you might not see that all the puzzle pieces fit together until you're at a certain point. Like I remember, so I started as an outdoor guide. I guided in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, then moved down to Chile. I then started in the nonprofit sector. And I remember when I started at Google, which was a big shift for me, I was in the interviews, and actually one of the people that was interviewing me, she asked me point blank, "What are you doing here?" She was
Wow.
like, I don't get it. So the reason I wanted to interview with Google and I wanted that to be part of my experience is I had seen, right, like people that were working from a place of passion and had a mission in the nonprofit sector, but weren't able to tie it to the business story or didn't know how to build a business plan or make a marketing plan. And so I knew that I wanted to be a part of that. And I couldn't get it from reading in a book. I considered going for an MBA, but I thought, my gosh, if I could be like in it, what an incredible place to learn. But, she's reading my resume and she's like, "You were doing farm and rangeland conservation in Montana? And now you want to sell ads? Like, are you sure you're in the right place?" Yes, I definitely am. I want to be part of something big, something bigger than myself. I want to learn. I want to be challenged. And so I heard that almost at every step of my career, and only until the last, I would say, 5 years did that story shift. And I'm almost 45. So it took a while. But now when and working in the professional coaching space, working directly with founders and people who are really making big impacts in our worlds, I'll sit down with people and share with them my story. And what I hear now is, "Oh my God, that makes perfect sense."
Yeah. I love
But
it.
had I waited for somebody to tell me that, I never would have gotten that message.
Mm. Oh, so good. Okay. So let's go back to that decision to close your thriving business. And then you decided to take a sabbatical in the Dominican with your family. So how did
Yeah.
that change the way you think about leadership, ambition, and really like how you define success?
Yeah. So that was a big moment, personally and professionally. So I rolled down Prismatic, which was my e-commerce consulting firm. And, in making that decision, I struggled a lot. Like I think I'd mentioned earlier, at the time I was working with an executive coach, and the way that we worked together really wasn't focused on like what I should be doing as a leader, right? How to optimize my email, or it was really getting to a deeper level of my beliefs, the habits and patterns, the beliefs, the way of me being in the world that allowed me to be really successful, but were also the same things that were holding me back from my next level, right? Of leadership, of connection with others. I would say also it impacted my personal life, my connection with my family. And one of those beliefs that I think I know I've had for a very long time is about quitting. Like that quitting, right, it's the easy way out. It's like what people do when they don't have the gumption, the grit, the discipline to keep going. And that decision to close my business, I think helps solidify what actually has been one of my core beliefs, which is around that like quitting or saying like, "I'm not going to do this," or taking a different path. And actually quitting for me in that moment, instead of being the easy way out, it was the brave way in. I went from, so I have twin girls. They turned 13 this summer, which I'm about to have two teenage girls in the house. But at the time they were 9. And, I had a corporate career, which was really demanding. And then I joined in a partnership and then launched my own business. So the previous 10 years had been just driving. And I think that act of quitting or noticing this is no longer for me. I don't know what to put on LinkedIn when I do that says what I'm doing now, but this isn't it. And I'm going to stop. That was a very new thing for me to be able to do. But what that allowed for was this like space, and to also sit in the not knowing, which I'm the type of person, like, I love to plan. I love to organize. Like, when my twins were born, I had this whiteboard up with like their feeding schedule and their sleeping schedule. These girls have taught me so much. They came into my life and just blew that up. They're like, we want a whiteboard feeding and sleeping schedule. But, when we went to the DR, which is where my father's from, immigrated to the US from there. So it was a time to reconnect and then just actually separate. What was so valuable about that time is I got to come out of the normal day to day, or what I assumed was like normal and, what everybody else was doing. And living in the DR, it's a very different lifestyle for many reasons. But I think it allowed me to like recalibrate, take a deep breath. I floss my teeth every day. My dentist, when I came back, was like, wow, really improved your dental health. And I was like, I was flossing every day. So I prioritize these things that in the normal rush and day to day just fell to the back burner. And then I think, too, on that time away, I began to rebuild my own internal operating system. Like, to be able to choose, how is it that I want to be? Not what could I do, or what am I good at, or what have I always been paid for, or what's the next $1 million business I could build, but like, how do I want to be in the world? And then I started building from that question.
Wow. So I love this concept of like rebuilding your internal operating system. And I think like when you and I first met
Yeah.
and you were explaining like the kind of work that you do, I mean, it is really different from what like, people listening might think of as like a traditional coach. And a lot of it is rooted on, you mentioned this earlier, is around that idea that the things that build a leader's success often at some point become what holds them back or what caps them from growing. So when you think about, you did this work for yourself, and I know it's the work you do with your clients too.
Yeah.
Can you give everyone listening like an example of what that looks like and maybe some of the patterns you see in those high performing founders and executives that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to go first, which is, when I was doing this work with my coach, one of the things that we defined as part of the methodology was, what is at that time my hidden fear, right? The thing I didn't want anybody to know about me or think about me ever. And what is my limited belief? That belief that has me, right, see the world a very certain way. And the way that I see the world has me take the action then that comes from that. And you can see in the video, I'm like on the screen with you, I almost put blinders on because that is like all that I can see when I'm in that belief system. For me, I uncovered my limited belief as I have to be responsible. With other leaders that I work with that are high performing and who have built businesses from the ground up, some of the beliefs that I hear very often are variations of, I have to do it all myself, or I don't deserve it, or if I don't do it, it will fall apart. And those beliefs, and I actually was a client of mine that introduced this phrase of internal operating system. That is, it's like software that runs in the back of our mind, right? And actually dictates how we show up in the world without us even realizing it. And so, most coaching, if we think about traditional business coaching, it's focused on what you're doing. And the work that I do with my clients and coaching partners is how you're being, the beliefs, the fears, the patterns that run beneath everything. And in the way that I work with my clients is we do coaching intensive. So minimum 6 months of working together. And that really is, from a research perspective, the amount of time it takes for a human being to really make some big transformational shifts. It doesn't happen in 30 days. It doesn't happen in 90 days. But over the 6 months, we go through a process of literally creating a customized map. And in that map, my coaching partners have an opportunity to identify and name. Naming it is really important. What's actually driving the reactions, right? That drive maybe to prove or to persevere, to stretch. And we begin to, one, identify those, recognize and be grateful, right? What has that allowed me to do? Like for mine, I have to be responsible. That allowed me to come, my background, my father's an immigrant from the Dominican Republic. My mom got pregnant with me at 19. I was the first person in my family to go away to a traditional school. I ended up at Dartmouth, which is in the Ivy League. And I showed up, when I when I went to school, my parents didn't know that like you move most of the people that I went to school with, their parents drove them or flew with them, moved them in. My parents, like, I love them. They were like, you got this. Put me on a plane and sent boxes by FedEx. And I had to figure out how to get them at the mailbox. Like, I have to be responsible. Allow me to do a lot that I think otherwise wouldn't have done. But your question is really important, which is that moment that I started to notice it was holding me back and keeping me in this place of like needing to get it perfectly right. And so when we go through the process and my methodology I use to really rebuild that internal operating system, it is an opportunity to, instead of just keep patching, right? Like,
Yep.
fixes, to actually like rebuild how you respond versus react, how you even understand what something means about you when it goes sideways in the business. And that I find allows, and I hear from the people I work with, allows them to show up in a completely new way. Not that they're a new person. We haven't done a personality transplant, but they're able to make choices instead of just fall back into this reactive, what I would call a 20-lane highway of how you will have always done it.
Yes, I can see that. It's like having a mirror all of a sudden, right? And so then, yeah, when you see that, then also you can choose a different path forward, depending on the situation, right? But like if you don't even know you're doing something, then you can't consciously try to change it if it's something you want to change.
Right. And not
Yeah.
only, I mean, you're a fish in water, right? You don't know
Yeah.
that you're doing it.
Yes.
And without having a space that is safe, and you're not trying to have this conversation or like ask questions from a VP when you're a CEO, or you're not trying to process it with your spouse at home after you both had a long day. There's a dedicated space to really like kind of pull those pieces out and look at them. And you said it's hard to see it when you're in it or when you've always done it that way. I think it's also hard sometimes, I even come up against this as I'm evolving and growing my business now. There's a fear of, well, I've always done it that way and I've been pretty successful, but I'm starting to notice a cost. And yet, like, if I stop doing it that way, what's my alternative? And so we also work to build that together.
Mm.
How do you want to? What do you want it to feel like? And it's interesting, Priya, you mentioned, my background is in deep analytical marketing analytics work. I think when I came into coaching, there was a part of me that questioned, like, if some of this the methodology that I'm using or the way that I want to work with people, like, is it too soft?
Mm.
And I've now had 22 people go through my one-on-one intensive program. And my answer is no, absolutely not. I think this is increasingly important as our culture and work environments change and evolve. Being this aware as a leader is like, it's your unfair advantage, honestly, in
Yes.
being successful, in enabling and empowering others. It's not weak. It's just like, what we just talked about, that like the flipping of the idea of like quitting is the easy way out. Quitting is for quitters. Those people have no grit. It's like, no, when you have the alignment to say no to something that is not for you, it brings in so much power and choice. But you have to train yourself not to be so scared of what everybody else is going to think.
100%. I mean, the line, quitting isn't the easy way out, it's the brave way in, is just like so powerful. And like, I remember the first time I heard you say that, I was like, oh my gosh, like actually I felt some relief because I definitely have in my own career, like when I left TV, I think that was like the messaging I got from other people was like,
Totally.
why would you leave that job? Like what? Like it's such a great job. So many people would be like so happy to have that job and those kinds of like so then you
You've done
start
so
telling
much work
yourself
to
that
get
story.
there. How can you
Yes.
abandon everything that you've
Yes.
invested,
Yeah.
start on
And
this
then
unknown path?
exactly. And then that is like that's the story you tell yourself, right? Oh, I quit. Oh, I failed. I couldn't handle it. Like all of these things instead of saying actually like that was a really brave thing to do because it's true, staying would have actually been easier, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
yeah,
In the short term.
in
In
the
the
short
short
term. In the
like a
short
short
term.
term.
Yes. Yeah.
But, so I think like I'd love to talk a little bit about our work together because that line, so I had done a Pachakacha. If any like people who are listening, if they're familiar, it's similar to a TED Talk, but it's a 6-minute talk. And that felt like a story that I really wanted to share. And Priya, you and I were doing some one-on-one work together. I had hired you to really start to build out some of these stories that I could share because the reason that I wanted to do that is I found myself like, as a coach, I think I was going into my second year of coaching but there were moments when I would ask myself like, am I doing this right? Or like look for language to try to describe what I did that somebody else has said and I could validate. And I was noticing I kept coming up against like I wanted something to feel more like me because in my coaching work, it's very relational. And especially I think with the rise of AI and people using it so much for writing and like getting ideas, I really wanted to be able to communicate with people. And the reason that I'm using the stories in this way and right, like create a bridge and also use it to be able to cultivate clients that to tell my true stories, which would attract the people that exactly were matched to be coaching partners with me and probably repel some others, honestly.
Yes,
That are
totally.
because
Yep.
if this is how I see the world and this is how I support people that are on these types of journeys and you're not there, we're not the right fit and that's okay. But I think that even that statement about quitting allowed me to see in a different way through our work together. And for me to realize like actually that is really core to how I see the world. And our work together, I remember we got to the point in our work where you and I were going to do a model or a tester podcast
Yes,
for
that's right.
interview. I was going to come and share with you my stories I had been working on. And I deferred the recording because I was so nervous and anxious that I wasn't going to get it right. And I was like, I'm not ready. I can't show Priya my stories yet. Or like, I'm not going to do a good job. And I was like, actually, this is kind of the whole point, right? And I think that like through working with you, I was able to see my stories more clearly. Because coming into it, I was like, well, kind of a lot of people have this background, or a lot of people see the world like this, don't they? And you were help me to really refine a set of stories that are for me. You never said you should say this or made up anything that wasn't true, but like we're just able to like bring it up out of me in a way that felt really true and authentic. And I've just, yeah, loved the experience. So I have to say that because it's changed a lot about how I connect with people, especially in like a first conversation or so. Yeah, it really helped me open up a new way of being in my own business, which is ironic to me because that's also how I help others, right? So I'm so grateful.
I love the way you captured that because like you said, the stories and the experience was all there. Like I felt like I could see it almost like the stories coming to the surface. And then like for me, I think like my role is to help you see the parts that are the most compelling because I
Mhm.
think that's the hardest part of our own stories is it's just yours, right? So it's hard to see like, well, what really stands out or what would resonate with somebody else. And I loved the way your confidence shift. I mean, I wouldn't say you weren't confident, but your confidence in how you were talking about your experience and your work, I felt like that really shifted once you were like, oh, okay, I have, like you said, this language that's not language somebody else gave me, but
Right.
some language that actually captures what I do, that, maybe like I helped you shape it, but ultimately you still had to do that final, like, okay, no, this is how this works for me. And I remember there were like, I made a couple of suggestions and you're like, something about that just doesn't feel right, or that's not the right story for right now. And that was great because, again, it's like you building that confidence in yourself to say, no, when something doesn't feel right, I also know that, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So, yeah. And that's amazing that it's just like you've been putting it into practice and it's really been helping so much.
Completely. And I think people also can tell the difference when you're in
Mhm.
conversation, right?
Yeah.
We are hungry to hear something real from somebody else.
Yeah.
I think everybody should work with you, actually. Can I do a commercial on your book? I just think it's so valuable. We can become so disconnected from our own truths. And this is a way that you know, working with you, I also was really nervous because I thought like, oh my God, how am I going to take all of these stories and make them make sense? And we worked together in a way where we had a couple sessions and then you came back to me with a PowerPoint. In fact, I have it up on my desktop right now to remind me of some of the stories that we worked on. But I'm at we did that together, 6 months or 8 months ago.
Yep.
And now I check in with those stories every once in a while, or I think about which ones might resonate with the person I'm about to sit down with. But I feel like I have, like a library of like, I think this would be really meaningful for them instead of what do I need to sell them today?
I love that. I mean, the stories, the way you connect through stories, it is so different. And that's such a great point on like, I'm going to share this story with them so they can really fully understand what I do versus like, I need to pitch them so they buy this. Right.
Yeah.
And to your earlier point about it helping you find the right people, that is one of the most powerful things about our stories, I find, is it helps the right people and opportunities to find you when, especially when
Completely.
that story is like, yeah, it's true and authentic and like really connected to your purpose.
Yeah. And yeah, we could talk. I mean, I'm really interested in that. The piece too about what it feels like to actually tell a story that you're connected
Mhm.
to versus, I'm sure you've had this experience, right? Where you're like reading off of a script or like, oh, I know I need to nail these parts, or like I'm going into a promotion cycle and I know I need to fill out, like at Google, we had, our OKRs and there was this really intensive promotion process. And at that time, I hadn't had the benefit of working with you, but one of the thing that really worked when I made my request for a promotion that was out of cycle, but merited, was I went in and sat down with my manager at the time and I had the opportunity. I had done some market research about my contributions and the level and what I saw for that role within Google at the time, and was able to actually talk about over the last 6 months, the moments where the way that I approached a problem or the way that I partnered with somebody on the team or how I got something in front of a client made the difference, like changed trajectory. And she said yes. And I got a promotion and an adjustment to my pay. And I had been denied in the previous cycle because I think I was just I was like, it has to look right this way. And I was like reaching for things that I could prove to her versus like, hey, I want to share with you what I am seeing over the last 6 months of how I've progressed and what a difference it's made for the business, for clients, how I'm showing up differently. And here's what I see in the market. This is the level I see that I am. And that's my request. She was like, let me think about it, and came back and she's like, you're right. You were not at the right level. Let's make that change. Yes.
Yes.
It's too different, right? It's like, it's
Yep.
different. I was being different in both of those situations and I had a different type of story, or I could show her the picture versus waiting for her to create the picture for me.
Yes. And like, I bet you gave her a narrative that was memorable and that she could also use to advocate for you too.
So she actually said that, Priya. And the other thing that she said to me is she said, I have so many people that come into my office and they say, like, I deserve a raise because I've been here for 3 years, or I deserve a raise because, right, like something that's not like she can't. And within Google, within many corporate structures, she has to make the case, right? There's like a budget that gets put out for compensation adjustments. And so when she was going into that meeting, she was making the case on my behalf. But instead of her having to like take the time to do that, I literally was able to give her, here are the 3 things that happened over the last 6 months that I'd like to share with you. And, and then what's the downstream effect in the business? And she had said, I just so appreciate how you did that, because it wasn't like, I deserve a raise and so you better give it to me, or everybody else got a raise so I should get a raise. She's like, I had a hard, here's what she said to me. She said, I had a really hard time saying no. So you're still,
Yes.
I mean, you should ask. In fact, that's my
Yes.
like takeaway from this whole, always
Yes.
ask. But
Always
I
ask.
think like how you feel about asking and how you show up, right? Like what your thoughts are about that ask. Am I being greedy? Or like, I'm really excited to talk about the difference that I made this quarter or over the last 6 months, or what I learned and how that has helped to grow the business. Like I felt my own body changes. I was giving you examples that like, it allows you to really be in it.
Yes.
And as humans, like our brains, my schooling background, my undergrad background is in cognitive behavioral sciences. And like our brains crave that pattern. They want to know a story, they want to make sense. And so I think this, like the way that you allow people to build that story, you're really a master at it. Of like, and of having it feel like all of these stories I have now are mine, but I have a better way of sharing them.
Yeah, I honestly I really appreciate the way you captured that. And that is always my goal too. Like I want the story to feel like you. Like that's so important because otherwise you won't use it, right? Like it has to
Yeah, and
feel
you're like, "Oh, I'm just back to this smarmy." Like for me,
yes.
even selling, if like, you and I met, we were in a coaching mastermind together really about like staying in alignment as you're selling, right? Because
Yep.
we're building businesses, we have to sell. We need clients. But there's a difference between selling from a place of like, you need to buy this thing or I need this sale so bad, and like, I have something to offer
Yes.
and it has value.
Yep.
And I'm excited to be out there to connect it with people that it can make a big difference with. And I think like the difference between those 2 things is story, is how you understand the story, how you share the story. And since the dawn of time, humans depend on story.
Yes. Yeah, they truly do. And what's interesting is like a lot of your work is rooted in story too, but it's almost
It
like,
is.
right? It's almost like a hidden story in a different way. So
Yeah.
when you were saying earlier, like how one of the first milestones with your clients is getting them to name some of those behaviors, I would love for you to give an example of like what happens after. Like, so after you've seen a client like finally be like, oh, I have to be responsible for everything, or if I don't do it, it falls apart. And then what do they do after that, that transformation that happens with your work?
Yeah. So what comes next is really them having a new, I've had a client talk about it as like cleaning your glasses. Like you have a new way of seeing situations. And what I see particularly, so all of my clients are business leaders. They're either founders, owners who have purchased a business from a founder, or the highest level executives in their organization. And so, right, we are focused on business items, but often when we're, especially at that level, you might think that you are reacting to a business problem
Yeah.
or trying to solve a business problem or have an issue with a business problem. But actually, what you're reacting to is a story about yourself. And if you're not aware of that, that becomes your biggest, that is your biggest fatal issue in business, I think. There actually is a story, since we're talking about stories, one that was really powerful. I work not only one-on-one, but I work in pairs as well. So the pair could be a CEO, CMO. In this case, it was a founder and a president, and we are now into our second year of working together. But this instance happened when we were about 1 year. So both of them, both of those individuals we had built their maps, we were working in frameworks, and we were in an in-person session together. And the founder had noticed there was an issue that had come up with a client. And this really had the founder incredibly frustrated. And, they spent, I would say, in session, a full 5 minutes, which is a very unusual amount of time for one person to talk. But she was in such an emotional state about what had gone wrong, who hadn't fixed it, what the repercussions were in the business, you know, this list. And at one point in her conversation, as she was sharing this and just getting so upset about what this person had done wrong and what a grave error it was and how they weren't listening to her feedback about how to fix it, I just said, I want to pause you for a second and ask you, what are you making this mean about you? And she shifted. There was a lot of emotion that came in that moment. And she said that I'm irrelevant. And it was such an important moment and so masterful of her to go from such a heightened emotional state to actually then being able to name, whoa, that reaction, when I'm at a 15, right? When someone else might get a level 2 of reaction, there's something else going on, probably with me. I'm making this mean something. And when she named it, like the energy in the room was able to come down.
Wow.
And I think she even said, oh, wow. Okay. And so then we had a moment where we were able to actually focus on how to resolve the issue at hand, which also included, right, her recognizing if I'm making that person's actions mean that I'm irrelevant, and this is a person who founded an incredibly successful business and after 25 years is attempting to hand over the reins and step back. And so that belief of I'm irrelevant was really getting in the way for her.
Yeah.
And so, what we worked on next was actually like seeing the situation for what it was, not the stories or assumptions, but actually factually what happened, black and white. And then what action that she wanted to take aligned to the outcome that she actually desired. If that belief, I'm irrelevant, wasn't all mixed up in, right, the next steps professionally. And so I think, Priya, that's just a great example of what this looks like in action.
Yeah.
And it also takes a lot of bravery. I mean, that person, she is at the top of her game. And she is widely known as an expert in her field. She is a badass. But she is also willing to slow it down and say something out loud that is uncomfortable for the purpose of then being able to move forward.
That is like, even though I've heard part of that story before, like I still got chills just hearing that. And like, I think it's also such a good reminder that when we see people who were like, oh, that person has it all figured out, like, look at them on paper, like there is something going on below the surface for all of us.
Yes.
And what I think is so fascinating about your work is like you're helping people get to know themselves in a different way too. And like that, I'm sure that realized it, of course, it changed how she operated in her business, but I'm sure it also changed how she shows up in her personal life in some ways too.
Yeah.
And that I think is such a fascinating part of what you do.
Well, and I think you just said it probably changed how she was in her business. So her partner in this coaching, which was the president in the firm,
Yeah.
actually reported back to me. Whenever I finish an intensive, I always do a feedback session, like a reflection session. So my clients get a chance to think about where they started, right? What their challenges were then, what's shifted, and then where their growth edges, what's next. And in the feedback session that I had the chance to do with the president, who's her counterpart, right, her colleague at the firm, she had said, since our work together, it's almost like working with a completely different person.
How Wow. Like that kind of feedback, that's incredible. And like they had come to you, I think, because there was some friction between them too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the
Yeah.
natural, like,
Yeah.
as an organization evolves and the founder is
Yeah.
ready to pass the baton, there's natural friction.
Yep.
It actually, that is probably one of the most combustible moments in business
Yep.
because, well, for many reasons we will, but like, they have a ton of respect for each other, but very different working styles. And I think that belief that was raised, that the founder was able to raise with such honesty and clarity in other relationships where, say, a pair like this didn't have the space to surface that
Hmm.
gets toxic. It can undermine everything that you actually want to be doing if it's just allowed to operate in the background and like, right, drives how you show up every day. Because if
Yeah.
you're, and I'm not saying that this person does this, but let's just say if we take that one step further and imagine like you or I, right, come into our office or go into our work every day, prove that we are not irrelevant. It completely like changes the direction of how you speak to other people, how you receive messages of criticism or feedback, right? So she was able to really transition that. And my role in that is not telling her what that should be, but holding the flashlight so she can see it differently. Like it's really an invitation. And I think, in my work, I imagine similar to your work, the person that I'm working with, my coaching partner, also has to be ready.
Yes. Because it's uncomfortable sometimes, right? Like, and you're
Yeah.
right. Like, you have to want to do the work. It's not something that someone should or can force you to do. You have to be like ready to examine some of your behaviors, to look at yourself in a different way. And yeah, to know that, like, I'm sure when she said, I'm worried I'll be irrelevant, like that, I'm sure she even surprised herself. Kind of like that moment when you were just saying, I never want to do
Right.
this again. We were
Yeah.
like, did I just say that? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, then to have a space like what I, earlier in the conversation, you said, what is the common thread of your work that somebody might
Yeah.
look at on paper and be like, I don't know. How are
Yeah.
these things related? I think it is like building the space where other people, right, can come into it
Yeah.
and have like trust and safety. When I was a guide, taking people, I was a mountain bike guide and then a trekking and mountaineering guide in Chile. And people, right, they were on their physical edge of what they were capable of. And that is connected also to our beliefs about what we're capable of. And it was also like, for me, I found it like part of my role was safety, right, to make
Mhm.
sure that nobody got hurt. The other part of it, which was an honor, is to be with individuals, with human beings when they're at their edge and, not push them, but like really be there. So when
Yes.
they choose to take the next step or to ride something they've never ridden before or to really like try something new, they know that they aren't alone. And I don't know what they're going to choose to do. Just like in coaching sessions, I don't know what somebody's going to bring every day.
Yep.
But the fact that the space exists for them to like take the chance or say something out loud they've never said before, like I'm so grateful that gets to be my work. Like that gets to be what I build for others and invite them into. And I, back to my limited belief of I have to be responsible. When I'm in my core, which is the antidote to my limited self in my methodology, my core belief is I'm a difference maker.
Mm.
And so when I'm a
Yes.
difference maker, there is no like, right, I have to be responsible versus I'm a difference maker. I can choose one versus the other. And when
Yes.
I'm in one place, it opens up doors and pathways for other people. And that's exactly where I want to be. So that is also like kind of a framework, a tool that I use and I teach my clients, right? We name what theirs are. So they have the chance to move from that reactive state or protective or fear-based state to actually, no, this is where I want to be. This is my special tool.
Oh, yes. I mean, I also love how you brought it full circle, how like you started as a guide and like actually you were still a guide.
Isn't
Like
that wild?
that
I
is
love,
wild.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
And in different ways. And one of the things that I'm working on building out in my professional coaching business now is actually a retreat model where people,
mm,
right, where I have the opportunity to bring that back in. And it's not going to be as extreme, right? We're going to be, that was a previous life of mine.
Yep.
But even just spending time outside, like getting out of your normal, regular pattern. And I'm really excited to see what happens when I have the chance to put those two things together.
Yes. Okay, we covered so much ground between like your own story, how you started doing the work you do, like how you work with your clients. Honestly, Kelly, I could talk to you all day. I'm curious to hear because as women, I feel like we're always like, okay, what's next? It's rare that we have these opportunities or take these opportunities to pause and reflect on our own success. So I'm curious
Um,
to hear from you, like after doing all of this reflection, like when you look back at your career, where you started, where you are now, what are you most proud of when you reflect on, the decisions you've made and the path you've taken?
I love that question. I think it is my willingness to evolve. That, like, even in the moments that felt really scary, or people were telling me I was nuts, or like, you're a fool to do this or that. And I'm in one of those moments right now in my business, actually. Like, right today, I am in that moment
Wow.
of like, there is something that I'm wanting to move towards that will be more true about how I connect with my clients and how I offer my services. But it's a new thing. And I had this moment of like being a little scared. Like, well, what if I don't get it right? What if I leap for something and then I will lose everything I've already built? And I think what I'm most proud of is that I've built up this muscle or this confidence that I can leap, and what will evolve, I don't know exactly what it will look like, but it's something that will unfold. And you know this, Priya, but like, I don't know, the analytical part of my brain is like, can I say 100%? But 100% of the time, when I do that, it is always better.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I want to stay in that place. It's what I'm most proud of. And as I continue to even be like at new edges, that's what I would love to keep, even as I get old and gray and wise and hopefully have a bunch of grandchildren running around someday. Like, I would love for that to be something that I continue to hold really close. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to lose because I know there's always more. There was always more in that next evolution.
Yeah. So I'm just like nodding along. I'm like, oh, I feel that way too. And also I think for me, like as somebody who has had like the privilege of getting to know you, that is something I really admire about you is that you've taken so many big risks in your career as an entrepreneur and also like in your career before that. And if you had to ask me, I think I would say that about you too. I think I would say like Kelly is
Oh,
always willing and passionate about evolving and like how can I do this differently? And like, I feel like you have this deep seated curiosity that is really inspiring. And like, you inspire that in other people too. And I mean,
God,
obviously that's part of your work
yeah.
too, right? People working with people who are curious about themselves and how they operate. So yeah,
Ah,
that is like, what a beautiful way to put that. I'm always willing to evolve. Yeah, I love
yeah.
it. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for today for this conversation. I know people will want to connect with you after hearing this. So, where's the best place for them ever to find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So Kelly Ramirez, I've got my profile and page, and I really try to share again stories that there. And then my website is welcome to elemental.com. And there's a
Perfect.
contact button there. I'd love to hear if people do hear this episode and it had them think of something or make a decision. I would love to hear that.
Absolutely. And we will link to your LinkedIn, to your website in the show notes
Great.
as well, so people can find you easily. And just thank you so much for everything you shared today, all of your wisdom. I loved hearing the stories, like some of the stories we worked on too. Like they're beautiful and they just feel like part of who you are and came so naturally. So thank you for that too. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's been such a gift to work with you and to become your friend, Priya. I really appreciate it. This has been a fun way to start the morning.
Ah, so happy to have you. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Yeah, see you soon.
See you soon. And thank you to all of you who tuned in today. Make sure you follow or subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss our weekly episodes. They drop every Tuesday. Until next time, remember your story is the one thing you have that no one else has. I'll see you next week.